So everyone, thank you very much for joining us on this dark lockdown afternoon, at least in England. So very lucky to be joined here by Matthew Le Merle. He's a long-standing blockchain and sustainability VC and fund manager. So a big source of knowledge for anyone looking at raising and anything in that space. He's working on a new carbon-related project. So excited to hear about that. So big thanks to Matthew for joining us. Thanks first of all to Tracer for supporting the Tech for Sustainability series. So they're a connected value chain platform for the diamond industry, looking to ensure consumer trust in the diamond industry and demonstrate provenance, traceability and authenticity of natural diamonds, and helping the local economies where they're mined. So big thanks to Tracer for supporting this series. Thanks to Matthew for joining us. To anyone who's joined us, we try and make these live chats as fun and engaging and interactive as possible. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function. You can put any comments in there. We've got a Q&A function, so you can post any questions in there. Please do put any questions we'll have. We'll get those all posted to Matthew afterwards and he'll get those all answered. So please do engage and put any comments or questions for us and we'll get those answered for you. And Matthew, thank you very much for joining from California.
Thanks a lot, Erica. It's great to be here. And last year I was attending some of the Crypto Curry Club events in London in person, but obviously that's not been possible for me. I normally split my time between Silicon Valley and the UK, but this year it's all been about Silicon Valley. Just as a little bit of background, and then I'm going to show you some slides, and then I know we're going to use up at least half the time for Q&A. My background is I grew up in the UK along with my wife and partner, Alison Davis. We came to America for business school and we never went back. And so we've been in Silicon Valley for about 35 years, dating ourselves. And our first careers, senior partners, large consulting firms. McKinsey was where we started, and then Carney, and then ran the global digital practice for booze. But that was all a long time ago. And the last 20 years has been mostly about investing. Internet and fintech was our core focus for the first part of that. That's Fifth Era. And then about 8 years ago, we got to know blockchain. And there's a little bit of backstory to that. Alison for 10 years was on the board of Royal Bank of Scotland, NatWest, and chaired the Innovation and Technology Committee. And about 8 years ago, the Bank of England asked the question, tell us about your view on Bitcoin. And so she went off on her own voyage of discovery, as many of us do, and was very intrigued, met a lot of very interesting people, and decided to get much more involved. And Brock Pierce and Bart and Brad Stevens invited her to be chairman of Blockchain Capital, which is a leading US VC in the space, and she still is. And we started to get more active as investors. And so Blockchain Co-Investors is our investment vehicle. We're investors in about 250 blockchain companies and projects, but we are a fund of funds. So we primarily invest in VCs. So that's sort of the background. Today, I'm wearing a different hat. I'm also got a couple of board roles. I'm chairman for Europe at Securitize, the STO company. I'm vice chairman of SFOX, the leading crypto prime dealer here in the independent crypto prime dealer here in the States. And then I'm chairman of Universal Protocol Alliance. So it's wearing the UPA hat that I'm here. And really this is all about carbon. So that was just context. I'm going to share some slides. So let me just do that. And let me just make sure that they are full screen. And this shouldn't take too long. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but I think it will make the question session more interesting if you've got the context. And so, I wanted to talk about digitizing carbon credits. And the reason I want to talk about this is because we think we have the opportunity to help everyone in the world, every individual, every business, to begin to participate actively in making the world a cleaner place. But today, the carbon markets of the world are very disorganized, very fragmented, very inaccessible. Large companies participate in the government carbon credit markets, what are called the cap and trade markets. And so BP gets gets ranked and rated in terms of how much pollution it generates. And then it has to go off and offset that pollution by buying government issued carbon credits for the most part. And those aren't really accessible to most of us. So the world's population at large can't buy those things. It's very difficult. And then there are these things called voluntary carbon credits. And that's what I'm focusing on right now, that are issued by rainforest protection projects or solar projects or wind projects or carbon sequestration projects. And those can be bought, but even those are not easy to buy. And they're still, for the most part, paper-based. And so what I'm going to talk to you about right now is what we think is a breakthrough, the digitalization of carbon credits and all of the derivative opportunities that then creates. So I do have to flash this up because these are actually crypto commodities. They are purchasable and tradable. So I just have to make it clear I'm not soliciting for you to buy them. I'm just telling you about them. It's educational only. This is who the UPA is. We're actually a coalition of leading primarily US blockchain companies. Bittrex International, that I know a lot of you are aware of, Uphold, Ledger in France, Certicay, Infinigold in Australia, Hajiaka is Greg Kidd's investment vehicle, the co-investor of Twitter, Square, Ripple, and so on, and then ourselves, a Fifth Era. We're trying to build the coalition, so we're looking for companies and blockchain projects that want to join. And our vision is that every asset will be tokenized, and we're focusing on cryptocurrencies, stable coins, and crypto commodities. So in the US context, we are digitizing everything that rolls up to the CFTC, the Commodities and Futures Commission. The SEC oversees securities, and that's not what we're doing. Securitize is an example of a company that is tokenizing securities. There are lots of benefits of digitalization. I won't go through them now. We've basically been building a token factory. We had issued a token of our own, UPT, in order to make it possible for the UP Alliance to build out a tokenization factory that can substantiate and tokenize anything in a very rapid and seamless way. And the first three things were stable coins. I won't talk about those. We've tokenized gold and other precious metals are coming. And today I'm just going to focus on the two things on the right-hand side, universal carbon, UPCO2, and then Bitcoin Zero, which is an example of a derivative product. And I'm hoping that some of you will come up with your own ideas about derivative products or other ways of benefiting from digitized carbon credits. So I will talk a bit about Bitcoin Zero as a case study, just so that it may give you ideas for what you might be able to do. So why does this all matter? Well, I think we all know why it matters. Climate change is probably the defining challenge of the next generation and probably of our generation too. The world has got better in many, many, many ways in our lifetimes. But the big collateral damage of all of our innovation and change is that the climate has been getting worse. Or at least the environment has been getting worse. It's up to you whether you think the environmental degradation is also creating climate change. That's, something that the scientists are almost all in agreement around, but I know a lot of individuals don't quite believe it. And it is hard to disaggregate what part of climate change is driven by environmental degradation and carbon releasing, and what portion of it might be a longer term cycle the Earth is going through. So I don't want to debate that. I mean, the reality is the Earth's a dirtier place and there's more carbon in the environment than ever. And that we got to believe is not a good thing. Carbon credits, as I already outlined, both the government ones and the voluntary ones are really quite important because we're trying to find global solutions that everyone will buy into that will make it more expensive to pollute, and conversely will reward those people that are finding ways of making the Earth a cleaner place. And you're going to be hosting in Glasgow. I say you because I'm assuming most of you in the UK. you're going to be hosting the United Nations COP26 conference in Glasgow in November, and that will be a major focus of this topic. There's a couple of points on research there. 90% of millennials think that this is one of their top issues, and they're very worried about it. And it is also the #1 investment themes in some of surveys, and there's Greta on the cover of Time. The problem is we're completely off track. So just to give you a sense of this, we don't even have the capacity to offset the polluters with the carbon credits that are currently being created. And there's a huge gap, a huge shortfall, according to the World Bank. And that's a big issue. In practice, it's primarily because there is no global marketplace and no global price. So it's very difficult to match demand and supply. And as I've already mentioned, most of you wouldn't be able to easily buy a carbon offset even if you wanted to. And if you did want to, you'd pay a big premium for the privilege. And so what we need to do is we need to remove carbon. This is, again, sort of a chart that's being broadly distributed by Peters. And it's a very interesting one. But basically, forestry is one of the most effective ways we can solve this problem, because every time we chop down a tree, its carbon goes somewhere. And in practice, a lot of that carbon does go into the atmosphere. It's true that as trees fall in a forest, which they routinely do, their carbon goes into the ground and gets reutilized by the plants. But human beings tend not to cut trees and let them decay where they fall. We tend to burn them, and so they go up into the atmosphere. Of course, it's taken millennia for all of the oil and gas of the world to be created, and we're at a relatively quick pace releasing it into the atmosphere. That, of course, is mostly decayed vegetation. But when it comes to trees, we are particularly good at eliminating them. And when you go to a place like the UK, once it was forested, and now very little of it is. So just to give you a little bit more context, REDD+ is the name of the form of carbon credits that are backed by rainforest voluntary projects. And they come in different flavors, but for the most part, someone has taken a piece of rainforest land and they have gone into a long-term agreement to protect it on the one hand, so to stop it being cut down, to also hopefully improve it, and in some cases to reforest it if it's already partially cut. And you can imagine it's in the greatest rainforests of the world. So it's in the Amazon, it's in parts of Central Africa, the Congo, Kenya, and so on, and in Southeast Asia. Those are the big rainforests that we have left. And so that's what a REDD+ credit is. And the best ones are highly verified and monitored by organizations like Vera. The demand is skyrocketing. So large companies see that if they actually offset their carbon footprints by buying government-issued carbon allocations, that's a one solution. But they also want to be able to demonstrate that they're having a positive impact on the environment and biodiversity and so on. And so most of these companies also buy voluntary carbon credits, as including the REDD+ carbon credits. So we set about tokenizing them. We're not the only people to have gone after that challenge. I was an advisor at a Viridium, which tried to do the same, and in fact had working carbon tokens a couple of years ago. And also I'm an advisor at Spark, based in the UK, which is successfully tokenizing the cap and trade government carbon allocations. But what we went after at Universal Protocol was this challenge of tokenizing the REDD carbon credits. And that's what we've done. So just as Bitcoin is a very easily accessible and tradable digital money, so we've created the equivalent for carbon. And by the way, I'm happy to say that in Brazil, another MOS is doing the same, and we wish them well. But essentially what we did was we took a verified carbon credit, we substantiated on a blockchain registry, and then and you can see that, it's fully transparent, and then we wrap that carbon credit in an ERC20 wrapper, and it trades as any other digital commodity. So that's essentially what we've done. And it's all verified by Certicay. And as I say, it's all substantiated and transparent, and you can actually see what's going on with the underlying. So there's no questions about that. It's already live on Uphold, but we want it to be in the world's wallets and exchanges. So part of the reason I'm here today, and thank you, Erica, for making it possible, is I want to make this available to every wallet and exchange in the world, as well as others. And that's part of the reason I'm here. If you know people that have wallets and exchanges, if you care about the environment and the climate, and if you could introduce the notion of a carbon credit to them, we would love to talk to them and give them this for them to use. What does it actually do? Very quickly, well, obviously you can buy it and hold it. Now, if you buy and hold it, there are some benefits to doing that. For the rainforest developers, for the actual people that are creating these carbon credits, they don't really gain a big benefit until you burn our token and retire the underlying carbon credit. And so on the right-hand side, obviously the developers of these projects hope that you will retire the carbon credit, that you will destroy the value that you have paid for the carbon credit. But you don't have to do that. You can buy, hold, and sell. And that has benefits. Why? Because there's demand, there's supply, and there's price. And there's a limited supply. So obviously, if you buy these things and just sit on them, you will make the price go up, and that will make the polluters pay more. All right? So if you really cared about the environment, you could buy some carbon tokens and just sit on them, and that would take out supply, push up price, and the polluters would have to pay more, or there would be more supply. And more supply would mean that there would be more good projects being backed, and they might be solar projects or wind projects. They don't all have to be rainforest projects. So that's sort of what's going on in terms of the economics. Will the price go up? I don't know, and I'm not saying it definitely will, but what I will say is the world's governments are trying to engineer this so that the price does go up. They want the polluters to have to pay more over time. So we're trying to turn this into a worldwide movement. We think it's a challenge for everyone. So far, only big organizations have been able to play, and we're trying to democratize this. First, this product, and then we'll create a family of products. So we'll have solar and wind and so on backed carbon tokens. So we're trying to mobilize every person and every business. We're trying to make it so easy for you to become carbon neutral. I talked about the derivative product. So this is really an interesting thought process now. So once you've digitized carbon, you can attach that digital good to any other digital good. And in so doing, you can net zero emission that other product. So in the case of Bitcoin, we know that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. It has a very positive carbon footprint, positive being bad in this context. And that is sort of an issue. In fact, most crypto tokens do have positive carbon footprints. So what we did was we actually took a look at all the academics that had calculated the carbon footprint of Bitcoin. And then we wrapped a real Bitcoin in an ERC20 wrapper, and we retired at minting enough of the universal carbon token such that that Bitcoin is now net zero emissions going forward. We don't know where it's been. We don't know how old it is. Well, we could figure out how old it is, but it's rather complicated to try and adjust for all of the Bitcoin energy usage in the past. But going forward, we've made it net zero emissions. So Bitcoin Zero is a real Bitcoin with net zero emissions. And that's also available right now on Uphold. And just to give you a sense, if Bitcoin today is trading at, say, $35,000, it only costs about $150 to make that net zero. So you can have full carbon Bitcoin for $35,000, or you can have Bitcoin zero at $35,150, and you get to choose. So that's an example, but what I'm trying to encourage all of you to think about is, what are all the other examples? So just as when we digitized money as music, it allowed us to create the iPod, and then after the iPod, where you could carry it all around with you, we had iTunes, which allowed you to buy and sell electronically, and today we stream all our music. So we think that as we've digitized the carbon credits, there should be many opportunities for you and other entrepreneurs to take advantage of this and build other products such as Bitcoin Zero, or to build actual functionality by incorporating digital carbon credits into other processes. So this is a big idea. It's pretty simple. If any of you want to work with us on it, happy to chat. Why shouldn't every customer of every bank, every asset manager, or every retailer have a button? They click the button. It allows them to calculate their carbon footprint, or the carbon footprint for that particular action they were about to take, the purchase. And then they, once they've got their carbon footprint, they click a button, they buy enough of this credit in a fractional form to make that transaction, or themselves or their companies or businesses or whatever, carbon neutral. We think that that is very easy to do, that we could easily create the world's first automated digital real-time way for any user to make themselves carbon neutral at a click of a button. And we want to do that before November, so that that is a centerpiece of the United Nations conference in Glasgow. So if any of this was interesting to you, please go to universalcarbon.com. I know we're now going to turn to the Q&A. We've got plenty of time left. Universal Carbon and Bitcoin Zero already trade, but the real point is I don't need you to go to Uphold. I want you to find digital wallets and exchanges and this to be available everywhere. And so we're looking for those partnerships and those introductions. We're looking for large enterprises in particular who'd like to work on making, what the last page, carbon footprint neutral at a click of a button possible. But conversely, if you're an entrepreneur and you want a partnership of any sort, and you can make sense of how this fits in, we're very interested in speaking. I think that Glasgow will be a great opportunity to push the world a long way forward in this regards. And we, the crypto community, the digital crypto community, the distributed community, we can do things faster, quicker, and easier. And to be honest, this is the last point I'll leave with you. The first ever World Climate Conference was held in Geneva 40 years ago. And it's still not easy to make yourself carbon neutral 40 years later. And I think that I don't want to knock the hard work of all of those government officials and big business people that have worked very hard for 40 years. But let's be clear, we're entrepreneurs. We don't wait 40 years. We have to do things in 4 months or even 4 weeks. And this we can do, and we can do it fast. So hopefully you'll join us. So with that, Erica, I'm going to stop the screen sharing.
Cool.
And then we've got all the rest of the time for Q&A.
No, Matthew, that was super interesting. Thank you so much for that. There's been a number of questions already posted. I'm just going to sort of kick off with my ones and then get on to everyone else, if that's okay. I've got 2 main questions, and I know Uzair, who's got his own crypto wallet, who will be speaking to you about potential partnerships on that, will be reaching out also. But first question on that note, because obviously crypto transactions are notorious in some cases for being quite energy intensive, and the amount of energy they use obviously changes depending on various factors, as well as on the different crypto. I mean, is that an option for, say, crypto wallets who want to offer the chance for all transactions to be carbon neutral, whereby for every transaction it can calculate exactly the carbon credits, and then they can choose to offset that on a per transaction basis?
So it is possible. It's not easy, but I think we're going to, we will be able to crack that that challenge at some time. Carbon footprint calculators are widely available. You can go online, just type in that word, carbon, footprint calculator, and there's plenty of choices. And they ask you a few questions. You figure it out for yourself. Businesses have to go through that process. Big enterprises, government requires them to. It's complicated, but they have to do it. Taking it all the way down to a crypto token. So a lot of academics have been doing work on this for Bitcoin. And I think the Bitcoin energy footprint is quite well understood. Of course, it's changing every day. And the Bitcoin miners are trying to be more efficient, and they're trying to figure out better ways of sourcing clean energy and things like this. So it is changing. So it's very dynamic. So would you ever get it exactly right? I sort of doubt it, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact that you could, in the transaction, allow people at their own choice to click a button that says, I want to offset this transaction with a micro fragment of a tokenized carbon credit, that is very easy to do. So if you want to be pedantic and say, was it enough? Was it too much? Was it too little?
Yeah.
You can get into an argument.
Sure.
But the big point is...
But within 10% roughly, it would be...
I don't know about 10%. I don't even want to commit to that. But what I can say is that if you've got a wallet and you want to add a button and you want to give people a chance to offset in real time against each transaction, that we can do, yes.
And just roughly, I mean, say for the average Ethereum transaction, it's about $7 at the moment. And obviously that will change all the time. Roughly, what would be the cost to offset one of those?
I haven't done the maths on that, so I don't know, Erica. We could probably look into it. The thing is that relative to the price of Bitcoin and the price of Ether, carbon tokens are very, very inexpensive. You can buy a ton of carbon for $10 or so. Actually, for most of you, it's going to cost you more like $20 because there's a big markup between the people that create these carbon credits and the cost that currently that you would have to pay. Part of our mission is to drive that price down. The goal is to get rid of there's more capital, there's more value between you and the carbon credit than there is the value of the carbon credit itself, right? So there's a lot of dead weight loss, if you will, that we can eliminate digitally. But I don't have the answer for an Ethereum transaction.
No worries. And how far are we from being at a stage where you can go into a shop and look at, I don't know, 5 white t-shirts and see the amount of carbon used for each one?
Right. Well, that's a great question. That isn't what we're working on. We're working on the other half of that dialogue, as I've mentioned. The world's biggest companies are coming to Glasgow in November, and they're being asked to begin to agree to a set of standards and policies and the like. Mark Carney, who is the former governor of the Bank of England, is an important figure, but not the only figure. I mean, I think the world's high and mighty are going to all be flying to Glasgow or electronically dialing in. I'm not sure how exactly it's going to work. And Boris Johnson's very involved in this, I know, too, as the host. So that's what they're supposed to be working on. It's easy when it's at the level of, say, a car. Well, it's not easy. It's always hard, but it's easier when it's a big transaction. I think, Erica, I used to be the head of strategy and marketing at Gap. So you asked me about t-shirts, and I know it would actually be pretty difficult. It would be pretty difficult to be accurate.
Okay.
But, on the other hand, once someone had done details around a t-shirt, I think you could generalize it to all t-shirts. If you want to be pedantic and say every t-shirt's different because it's got a different colored dye and a different size, and it may have a logo, and that may be printed, and that is a process, and that uses energy, then it's a never-ending saga of putting the issue off. And I think I know this is a very long answer, but that's part of why it's taken 40 years, because the naysayers can always come up with reasons why you didn't accurately figure this out. Well, in the court of law, we are only guilty once proven to be so, right? We are innocent until proven guilty. We can't take that stance with the climate. We have to assume we are guilty until we're proven innocent, because we're destroying the planet, and we only have one planet. So I think we need to reverse that process. We have to say, T-shirt manufacturer, you have to give us a number. And if it's difficult for you, you have to do the work, because we need you to offset the energy.
Because there's no excuse not to.
There are plenty of excuses, but the problem is we're destroying the planet. So the burden of proof has to be on their side of the slate. It's the same as tobacco. I remember for 20 years, the tobacco companies were saying, because you can't prove that we cause cancer, we should be allowed to carry on selling cigarettes. And I think we should have reversed the burden of proof and said, you've got to prove cigarettes don't cause cancer, and we will not allow you to sell them until you demonstrate that you are correct.
Cool.
But that burden of proof issue is what Glasgow is a lot about, I think.
Cool, thanks. We've got lots of questions coming in first from Tim Rook at IBM. He says, any forestry is a temporary state of carbon. A tree will eventually rot and release methane or be burnt. So what happens to the carbon credit then as the carbon is back in the atmosphere?
Okay, so so the carbon credit is not at the level of an individual tree; it's at the level of a piece of land. And sorry, I didn't get the name of the gentleman.
Tim Rook. Tim.
Yes, so Tim is absolutely correct. And when I was, we were working with Viridium and IBM. IBM was involved in the Viridium project. You know, our goal is not to change the natural processes of carbon, both release and removal. That is, the world works that way, and it is going on all the time. What we're trying to impact and combat is man's acceleration of those processes. So yes, you're absolutely right. A tree rots in a forest, and that is a natural process, and its carbon's being released and then it's being reused all of the time, everywhere. I said at the outset, humans just have accelerated that process greatly. So what happens with a carbon credit is a project manager is either agreeing to not allow a 10,000 hectares of forest to be deforested, or and that's what most of these are. Most of these are protected areas of rainforest, but the natural processes continue within that forest. Or sometimes they're reforestation projects. So in much of the equatorial region, so in Panama as an example, Alice and I are parties who have bought 10,000 acres of the Mamoni rainforest in Panama, which is one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world. And about half of the rainforest we bought had already been chopped down for cattle. And as part of that project, the Mamoni project, we're actually putting trees back. And so you would get a carbon credit for that. We've chosen not to register and sell the carbon credit. We're just doing the project because it's a good thing. But conceptually, that's how it works. So to your point, you're absolutely right. Trees fall all of the time. However, that's not really what the carbon credit is secured against.
Next question from Julian, who worked for, and I forgot the name now, but it's a large supply chain company in the meat industry, and built a blockchain platform to track the origins and traceability of meat. Is asking about how one could attach the token to commodities such as meat or wine, for example, how that would work.
Right. So that isn't a space that I've looked at yet. In the case of gold, so let's just talk about that for a second. Gold, crypto commodities secured by gold already exist. We've created the world's best one called Universal Gold, or UPCO2. Why is it the best one? Because the Perth Mint in Australia, which is the world's largest gold refiner, which means they're the world's largest producer of gold at this time, they are the underlying source of that gold that we have then tokenized. So how does the process actually work in that case? So they have gold in their vaults. They then issue a certificate, a digital certificate that is backed by real gold in their vaults. And then we take that digital certificate and we, each one of which is unique, and we wrap it in an ERC20 wrapper. So now you have a digitized, tokenized certificate backed by real gold that is held in the vaults. Why is that so important? Because then it carries a government guarantee, because the Perth Mint is a government entity, is a government-backed entity. So in this case, our gold token actually carries a government-issued certificate attached to it. Well, so now let's go on to another commodity like oil. I mean, barrels of oil are routinely traded in vast quantities on commodity exchanges. So digitizing a barrel of gold conceptually, a barrel of oil conceptually shouldn't be hard. It hasn't yet been done by anybody. What's the benefit of doing it? So it should not be hard to do. It's not a perishable per se, it is a consumable, but it shouldn't be hard to do. The benefit of it, of course, is that the digital representation can pop up in every digital wallet and digital exchange. Right? Whereas the paper version of it can trade on the world's great commodities exchanges, but you can't buy and sell it in a digital wallet. And as we all know, everyone in the world is now going to be enabled with digital wallets, not just by Coinbase and Robinhood and Revolut and, you know, Monzo and Ziglu, but also by established companies, you know, the bank, the Royal Bank, the NatWests and the Bank of Americas, and the Schwabs are soon going to have their digital wallets too. So I don't know about meat. I don't know about meat. It's not so much, I think you could use blockchain to track meat from source. The Chinese are doing that, of course, with pork bellies and all of their other livestock. There's a very good book, by the way, called Blockchain Chicken Factory, which I recommend, that talks about what's going on in China. The more challenging part is that meat is perishable and consumable, and even when it's in its frozen state, I don't think it lasts for very long. So how exactly you would then trade a crypto commodity based upon a perishable underlying commodity, I don't actually know how that would work.
Or would it just be looking at how much damage the meat does, maybe, and
well, that's a different issue. You could offset the environmental impact of raising cows and turning them into meat. That you can offset. However, I think the question was, could we create a crypto beef token? And I just don't know quite how that would work, because the underlying beef is perishable, and you know, in the case of the rainforest carbon credits, they last forever until you choose to retire them. So they actually, once issued, they're perpetual until retired.
Okay, I'll put Julian on to speak later and let you guys have a bit of a conversation around that, I'm sure. A couple questions about the economics and practicalities of the investment. Grace is asking, how secure is it? What are the risks? And Yanis is asking about the economics on if you buy the token, it goes up in price and becomes more expensive for the polluters. How does that work for the, or he's saying hodlers, so the crypto term for people who hold it?
Yes. Well, so let's just start with that last part of the question. You know, for those of us that did buy Bitcoin a while ago and have been hodling it, price has been going up, and on paper our value's been increasing. Of course, it doesn't mean anything until we sell it, unless, unfortunately, you're in a place where taxes are calculated in some other way. But in general, you buy an asset, you hold an asset, it may appreciate on paper, but it doesn't mean anything until you sell it. Well, the same would be true of a crypto commodity. You can buy this and hold it and the price can go up, but it doesn't mean anything until you want to sell it. If you sell it, then you get the higher price. If you retire it, that's an interesting question I haven't thought about. If you retire it, which is to say you burn it and you vaporize its value, would you be able to claim a tax deduction at the new higher value? I think you probably would, right? Because you'd say, I bought it at the low price. I essentially donated it to the earth at the high price, and my charitable or philanthropic act should generate a tax benefit at the higher value that I destroyed. I don't know if that would be true. So that's not, I don't know if that's true. So that's basically how you benefit from it. If you buy it and hold it and sell it, you're benefiting from the upward or downward movements in the price. If you retire it, you've eliminated it from existence. And that is actually when you're able to say, I had a positive impact. I am carbon neutral, which in the case of Bitcoin Zero, remember, we are destroying them at the minting of the Bitcoin Zero. So that's why we can claim it's net zero emissions.
No, thank you. A question from Josiane about well, if you are a charity focused around planting forests, how would they go about generating carbon tokens, or I guess potential partnerships about something like that?
Yes, great question. Well, this is, I would refer you to, in the first instance, Verra. There are several standards bodies. Verra is the principal in the rainforest space. There are other very good ones like a Gold Standard and so on. Verra actually registers, approves, and verifies, monitors most of the rainforest carbon credits and or forestry carbon credits. And so what you have to do if you have a piece of land or if you're planting trees is you have to go through a process where they will validate your actions. And unfortunately, it's quite costly today. So if you're a big player, so in the case of the Panama example I gave, we have 10,000 acres there with a few other people. And it wasn't really big enough to justify the costs of going through the whole carbon credit process. So that's an issue. But anyhow, so there is a well-defined process. At the end of it, you're issued your carbon credits, and there are certain rules around how many you can sell straight away, how many you get to sell later. And there are some reserves in case you change your mind so that the buyers are protected. There's a whole bunch, they've thought this through for 40 years. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of complexity as well, but it's an existing process and you can participate in it. And that's the same for people who are doing things in solar or wind, or frankly, Tesla. I mean, Tesla's a great example. Tesla only creates electrical vehicles. They go through the process and they're issued a lot of carbon credits. And ironically, the most polluting automotive companies in the world are buying their carbon credits from Tesla. And a lot of Tesla's profitability is driven by its sale of carbon credits.
Because they're trusted.
Well, they've been verified. Do we trust Tesla? We may trust Tesla, but we've had a long history of automotive companies that have done bad things. So in general, it's you don't trust, you verify. And so these agencies monitor, verify and monitor. It's not an issue of trust, it's an issue of ensuring that people do the things that they say they are doing.
Okay, thanks. Question from Grace. First of all, will you be attending COP26? But also, how can companies with monies that would be able to afford to invest now, but that don't choose to prioritize decarbonisation and the sustainable issues, do you think they'll be held back from buying their way through the next 20, 30 years? Or do you think there'll be any penalties placed to those companies that don't choose to, on top of the reputational and so issues that will come with that?
That's a great question. It's two great questions, but the second question is the great question. The first question is, yes, I plan to be in Glasgow if I'm able to be there. And that is not, that depends upon COVID and what happens. We're also looking for ways to be invited. So the way, a bit like other global conferences like Davos or whatever, the way it works is there's a lot of government activity occurring in Glasgow. And then there's all these pavilions and activities around that government activity. And part of the reason I'm here, Erica, is because I'm trying to issue an offer to anyone who's listening that we would love to partner and collaborate on preparing something really interesting this year that would be very beneficial, but could also be featured up at COP26.
What type of ideas would you have for that to give people?
Yes, well, on the one hand, we want the carbon credits in as many wallets and exchanges as possible. The second I've already mentioned is that we think there are derivative products that other people might be able to, it wouldn't be bad to say, you know, I am the UK's first net carbon emissions X, Y, or Z, and I did it with in digital format. If you were a crypto company, you're eating your own dog food, right? So it would be a good thing to be a crypto company that was also carbon neutral. And that then comes to the third point, which is the big question. Penalties will be assessed in the marketplace to the largest extent by how supply and demand gets met for whatever a company is building and launching and selling. The millennials are very, very worried about this topic. 90% of them think it is the defining issue for them and their families going forward. If this world of ours becomes uninhabitable, their legacy will bear consequences. It is our own legacy, because I'm from an older generation, so I shouldn't be passing that burden on. We should be solving that burden now. And so at the micro level, just as you have the choice of what you buy and consume, that's true around carbon too. If you had Bitcoin or Bitcoin Zero, you have a choice, right? And the percentage difference in price is very small.
But people need to see this uses X amount of carbon, that uses Y amount.
Yes, so I think Glasgow is about trying to make things more transparent, more universally agreed to. I think that the consumer ultimately will have then choices. And I think the companies that are the worst at not becoming clean and environmentally sustainable will pay the penalty, and they will get less purchasing activity. And we've already seen that to some extent in other areas of ESG and in diversity too. There's plenty of evidence now that companies that have diverse boards and good practices outperform those that don't. And investors are tending to throw their money at companies that can demonstrate that they have a mission and they are fulfilling it. And I think that's part of the reason why Tesla's share price has gone through the roof. It's that the millennials of the world believe that Tesla is going to make the world a better place, and they're putting their money into Elon Musk's hands to try and make that happen.
And do you think, I mean, say, looking at, say, the crypto companies in here that may be looking at doing something to maybe make all of their transactions carbon zero, for example, or even positive, how do you think that will reflect when it comes to talking to investors or VCs, to go back to your investor hat?
Yes, I don't know. I don't know. So I think you do this first because you believe you're doing good. I think you do it secondly because your employers, your investors, and your customers are supportive of you doing it and think it's a good thing. And then thirdly, I expect you'll be able to make money from this, because I think this is one of those differentiating factors, but it won't be easy. So we've had organic food for a long time, and there are a lot of organic food producers, and there are challenges around monitoring, is it really organic, et cetera, et cetera. But most food in most supermarkets is not organic. And so it's not a slam dunk. Should organic be better than stuff that has been pesticided, fertilized, refined, and processed up the wazoo? Well, it is better for us, but it's still true that most people, when they buy food, don't buy what's better for them. They buy what's worse for them. And so there is that risk too. We could put a lot of energy in making carbon credits available at point of sale transactions globally, and then find that consumers choose to take the full carbon version. And that's their choice. I mean, I think that is their choice.
And it'll come down to price and everything for many. Yes,
government can actually bring a big sledgehammer, and I think they will, by the way. And there is a question from Grace Rogers. Is this call unfortunate in light of the inauguration? And ironically, it's the other way around. The inauguration is the bringing of America back into the tent. America had left the tent. America will be back in the tent, and that will mean an awful lot, I think, in the next few years.
I mean, going back to your last question about partnerships before lockdown, when we were still having the physical events, I'd been looking at how to make the curries, crypto curry events, carbon neutral, and how I could do that. And I'd been thinking about maybe going via the plastic bank route, where you can effectively pay people to get plastic bottles out of the ocean, or something along those lines. But I'm open to ideas. So if you've got ideas on how we can make either virtual or real life networking events that involve food and drinks and booking and so forth carbon neutral, I'm open to ideas about how we can get that implemented.
Well, the easiest way right now, I'll tell you what the easiest way is right now is, and I don't need, the goal is not that everyone has to open an Uphold account and buy the UPCO2 from Uphold. We're trying to get it into every digital wallet. So generically, the easiest way is that you would go to your digital wallet, you would click on buy some UPCO2, and then you would click on a second button that says retire it now. And at that point, you can claim your net zero emission then and there. You can already do that at Uphold. So you can go to Uphold, open an account, buy some UPCO2 and tell, but right now you have to tell by email that you want to retire it. In a few weeks, the functionality will be there where you'll just click a button and it will get retired.
Cool. I'll chat to Uphold again. Question from Uzair, who has a crypto wallet, who we'll end up speaking to after this call, no doubt. They've got a crypto wallet called Cent Finance, and they say they stuck to wrapped Bitcoin due to the environmental reasons. But what can they do above and beyond their own footprint to promote a more environmentally conscious approach within the sector? Are there any additional opportunities or programs or partnerships that you know of or can recommend for a crypto wallet to be the environmental crypto wallet? I don't know of any others that are trying to do that.
Well, so there's a first mover advantage here because I'm not aware of any environmental friendly digital wallet platform today. Now, there may be one, and I'd be interested if there is.
I haven't heard of any at all.
No, so conceptually, this person could take their wallet, they could get someone to help them calculate their, their positive carbon footprint, and then they could offset it by buying some carbon credits, either from us or from anyone actually. And then they would be able, and then if they also added some the product that I've already talked about as products in their crypto token suite, and if they added a little bit more functionality or did something else, I think that if they did enough of that sort of stuff, if they as individuals also offset their carbon footprints, so they could say, the management team and our employees are also carbon neutral. I think you could probably be the first in the world to say everything about us. We are the climate, we are the sustainable, friendly crypto company, and we are doing more than anyone else. And it would probably be a true claim. And you would be the first to be able to say that. Going back to the earlier point, would a lot of people open their accounts with you? I don't know, but would you have a good way of communicating to all of the members of the Sierra Club or the Climate Matters movement? Yes, you would. You would be in a much stronger position than anyone else in the world to try and get their business. So that could be interesting. Yeah, I mean, we're at the leading edge here. This is pioneering space. So I just think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think the drum will beat. So for at least the next, well, for the foreseeable future, this will be one of the most important global issues where the drum is beating hard, from governments through enterprises and companies to end users and consumers. And so I think it's not a bad time to be readying something where you can say, I'm a pioneer and I'm doing something better than anyone else. You should have opportunities to pull ahead. So it isn't coincidental that if you look at the world's biggest asset managers like BlackRock, Larry Fink says, one of the top 3 priorities for my company is to create more ESG product And why is he saying that? It's because every pension fund, every retirement system, every university endowment, every insurance company that he sells products to, ETFs and iShare index products and so on, they are all asking him to find them that product, right? So this is not a small thing. Trillions of dollars is going to shift towards people and platforms and products that take this seriously.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that one. Got a technical question from Stan about the key issue of carbon credits, is that they should be burned after being applied as a carbon offset. And how does your token address the question of double spend?
It's a great question. The issue of double spend is owned by the standards and the verification organizations. I've mentioned Vera. It's a real problem. It is a real problem. We only buy our carbon credits from those sort of AAA grade providers that not only are Vera certified, but which the whole community views as being the best in the space. There are many examples, as Stan probably knows, of people who have sold their carbon credit more than once, or have even had carbon credits issued on their project and then changed the project after they've sold the carbon credits. So that would be, the bad act would be, say you're going to protect some rainforest, get some carbon credits issued, sell as many as you're allowed, and then burn the rainforest, or sell it to someone else who burns the rainforest. Yeah. Well, that's no different than, I'm holding the gold, you've put the ETF on the gold, and then I go and rob the gold vault, or anything else for that matter. Most financial instruments are derivative instruments that believe that there's some underlying asset that sits underneath them, and bad things can happen in the custody of the underlying asset. Wrapped Bitcoin, which is broadly used and traded, well, Tether, let's use Tether as an example. Tether is a broadly traded product that has US dollars 1-for-1 backed, apparently, in a vault somewhere. And let's assume that they do have 1-for-1 backing. Someone could come and hack the vault and steal the dollars. So that's not quite what I know Stan means when he says double spend, but the risks and the challenges of the underlying asset being manipulated or used by a bad actor is real. And the way we mitigate against that is by trying to work only with the best actors. And that's sort of what we're doing. And the double spend issue, hopefully, there are other blockchain initiatives that are trying to create indexes and registers that are immutable on the blockchain that would make it harder to do bad acts. But some of the bad acts I just mentioned could be done even if we had registered the asset. You could still destroy the asset or steal the asset. So it's not just about double spend.
Yeah, I know that there's so many problems with the whole carbon credit market, of course, about what can be trusted, what is actually happening.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going to say the same thing I said before. When the internet first rolled out, there were a lot of problems with ISPs and browsers, and you tried to download an image of Erica and you get the first 5 lines and then it would break every time. You couldn't even download an image on America Online most of the time, right? But we didn't wait. We didn't say it's got faults, so therefore don't use it, right?
Yeah.
Now the telecommunication companies, they wanted you not to use it, so they were very quick to spread FUD about the problems. But we used it, we made it better, and today it's ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's price has been going up. All of the people that are on the short side are spreading FUD.
Yeah.
And what are they saying? They're saying things like they're saying the same things they've always said, and some of the things are simply without, like it isn't scarce because you can divide it. Well, that's a silly thing to say. If I take a pizza and I slice it into lots of little pieces I can't feed the world. It's still
Yeah.
just one pizza. So that's a silly comment, right? Or Bitcoin's only used by criminals. Well, that's not true. And in fact, the US $100 bill is used by criminals all the time. And it doesn't mean we don't use it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not perfect. So the same with carbon credits. The naysayers throw the issues that the carbon credit market has as a way of trying to avoid the inevitable, which is they have to pay more for polluting, right? And the further they can make the topic complicated and confusing and troublesome, the more they postpone for 40 years now the reality that they have to start polluting less and they have to pay more for the privilege of doing so too.
And be shown up for doing so.
Yeah.
No, super interesting, Matthew. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time and everything, but no, thank you so much for that. Been really interesting. I know there's a few people who messaged me that they're going to be following up with you for various ideas of partnerships or so forth. So no, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Matthew, for your time. Is it okay to share your contact details with people afterwards?
Yes, you know, post anything that you want. We're you know, I am a member of the Crypto Curry Club. I love coming to your events, Erica. I listen in and I sometimes watch them when I can't make it. I always learn a lot and I really like mingling with everyone else. And I would be attending in person.
No,
if
we
it wasn't
can't.
For the
we can't
fact.
wait to have you back for more curry, and we'll have to start negotiations with Brewdog and other craft beer suppliers. Again, as and when we can get back to in person. We can't wait. But thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
again.
much.
Look forward to seeing you back in England as and when we can.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Matthew. Bye.